Hey guys, so in going back through my Tumblr archives trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about today, I discovered that the first video I ever made that was really the informational vlog style had never been remade. And that is about trialing flutes and buying a new flute. And I think that's something that's definitely worthwhile and definitely deserves more than the original 5 minutes I was able to give it. And so that's what we're gonna do today. So first I'm going to kind of talk you guys through what I did, and then we're going to move on to the advice section, what I learned from my experiences, and what I want to pass on to you guys. I bought my current flute, or at least part of the current flute, I'll get into that in a second, in the summer of 2012. It was between my second and third year of university, and I was kind of getting to the point with my old flute where it was working, but it was making me work harder than I needed to. And I didn't know that, but luckily I had a great teacher who was pretty good at identifying that and kind of went to me and my parents, hey, you probably want to look into getting a new flute. And my parents were awesome and were willing to kind of shuttle me around to try things. So we started that process. And everyone had always told us, try as many as you can. And being from Northeast Ohio, I am pretty close to Detroit, which means that I'm pretty close to Flute World. For those of you who don't know what Flute World is, it's the biggest online retailer for flute everything in the US, and it also has a physical store. And there you can go and try just about any flute you could possibly think of, because they sell any flute that you can possibly think of. At the time they didn't have Nagaharas, now they have Nagahara. So if you're close to Flute World, it's a really great resource. So we went to Detroit, tried a bunch of flutes. My dad and I went up for a day. We kind of called ahead and told them what I was interested in, and they brought out like flute on top of flute on top of flute. Like, I probably tried about 25 instruments over the course of the day. My dad and I took notes, and we narrowed it down to the kinds of instruments I was looking for, and then we made a plan to go to Boston. Why Boston, you ask? Because the majority of the major flute brands have workshops there. There are some in Chicago, there are, Altus is in Tennessee, there are some that aren't and based in Boston, but the two that I was most interested in at the time, which were Brandon and Nagahara, were based in Boston, along with Powell, Burkhart, Haynes, and a bunch of others. We decided I wanted to look at four, which were of course Brandon and Nagahara, as well as Haynes and Powell. I don't entirely know how I ended up with that list, but it worked out. So, I didn't really like the Burkharts that I tried at Flute Worlds. That was why that one never ended up on the list. And at the time I didn't know a ton about flutes and flute makers, so now I probably would have gone about it differently. We'll get into that later. So we went and made appointments at each place, and I kind of, again, told them what I was interested in. They had flutes waiting for me and ready, and I ended up buying a all-silver Haynes basically trial model. It was the flute I tried in the workshop, and I fell in love with it, and it's the flute that I kind of play on now. So that leads into my head joint search. I don't play the Haynes head joint that I originally bought. I actually bought a Dana Sheridan 14 karat Gold Riser silver head joint in 2015, and that's what I play now. And that's one of the things that I don't really regret, but was very evident in the time since I made the original video about this, is that head joint didn't end up suiting me, and I had to go through the process again, just on a smaller scale. When I was getting that head joint in, I really knew what I wanted. I had tried hundreds of flutes at that point, and I was really lucky that my teacher had a collection of really incredible head joints made by a lot of English makers, and she had this absolutely amazing Gold Riser Albert Cooper head joint. I'm going to talk about Cooper in my next installment of the Famous Flutists, which should be coming up soon, by the way. But I wanted to find a replica of this head joint, and discovered that Albert Cooper original head joints are very difficult to find because he passed away in 2011, and no one really sells his head joints once they have them. You can kind of find one or two on the market secondhand, and I was very interested in that and was looking for them everywhere. But I also started looking into who had studied with Cooper and was making Cooper style head joints now. discovered that Sheridan was one of the big ones, and when I found a used Cooper for sale through Carolyn Nussbaum, who is another retailer based in Texas, I also ordered a couple Sheridan head joints to trial with it. I ended up actually hating the Cooper that I actually couldn't even try the Cooper because it wouldn't fit on my flute, but fell in love with my current head joint, and that is what I've been playing ever since. So, that's my process. What should you do when you're going to try flutes? Definitely bring someone with you. There are salespeople there all the time, but they're still salespeople. They're very knowledgeable and they're very good at telling you kind of what isn't good, but they're always gonna sugarcoat it a little bit, and they're always going to want you to buy their instruments. So they're never gonna tell you, oh, well, maybe you should go try that Haynes, or maybe you should go try that Nagahara, when they don't sell Nagahara or Haynes or whatever it is. Your friends, however, will tell you, you sounded better on that flute at the other place, or you sounded better before now on this other instrument, or you sound the same you did on your current instrument, which is not the point. So having a friend there to kind of give you critique that isn't clouded by sales pitches is very important. Also, definitely take notes. You have that friend there, ask them to kind of write down what you think, what they think, and that way if you end up having to take time between all of these trials, which you probably will, you have some ideas about what you liked about the first one and the last one. The reality is that somewhere in the middle you'll probably end up finding one that you like, but at least this way you have a sense of comparison without having to have a perfect memory and remember exactly what you liked about the first flute you tried. The next thing is definitely don't limit yourself to what you think you should buy. I talked about really thinking that I wanted a Brandon body with a Nagahara head joint. Clearly, I didn't end up buying that. I didn't end up really meshing well with either the Brandon bodies or the Nagahara head joints. And they were so expensive that it was not worth the struggle to find one that I really liked. I really liked this Haynes that I found that was way cheaper. So that was a huge factor in picking the Haynes, was I liked it more and it was more in our price range. So why was I trying to go with what I thought I should get? You also definitely need to have an idea of what you're looking for. It's really, really hard to find an instrument when you're just kind of like, I want a better flute. When you're going to these big makers and you're buying a $10,000 to $20,000+ instrument, they're all gonna sound good. But do you want something that's gonna be really responsive in the high range because you struggle with the high range? Or do you want something that's gonna help out your low range? Do you want something that has a lot of flexibility of sound because you do a lot of different styles? Or do you want something that's really going to have that perfect orchestral sound that will help you get into any orchestra in the world? Whatever it is, you have to kind of narrow down what you're looking for. And I think that's one of the problems that I ran into, was I didn't know what kind of sound I was looking for, and I ended up kind of just picking something that I thought sounded good. And 2 years later, I had outgrown it. The body was great, and I loved the key work and the way it felt. That was great, but it was too bright, it was too inflexible, and for someone who was really doing something where flexibility of sound was everything, because contemporary music can be anything from beautiful, lyrical, bright sound to dark, intense, scary things. I needed more flexibility and something that wasn't as set in one sound. Obviously, things change as you get older, and that's definitely the case with me, but it's something to keep in mind if you're set on an orchestral career and that's really what you think you need to go for, if you're set in an orchestral career, you want to try to find a flute that fits that mold. If you're trying to do kind of a freelance amalgam career and you have an idea of what kinds of things you want to do and there's a specific sound for that, go for that. But really think about critically what you're going to be doing with this instrument and find something that fits that, not just, I want an expensive flute because it's a status symbol. I think that's the biggest thing, is it's not just a status symbol. It's something that you have to use on a daily basis and that has to fit your needs. And there's the whole joke that like buying flutes is like the wands in Harry Potter. Eventually the flute will pick the player, but you do also have to give the flute some ideas of what you're looking for. Because had I been going for something else, I might have ended up with that Brannon or with a Powell or with something completely different. Don't get overwhelmed. It can be really, really hard to see all these instruments and try all these instruments and even find any sort of decision. And that's why taking the time and everything like that is great, and also taking notes. But really, don't worry if you don't find something the first time you try everything. You have all the time in the world. Just because you're playing on a flute that isn't perfect for you yet doesn't mean that you have to find that perfect one in the next 2 months. You can take 2 years if you want. If you're investing that much money, you want to find something that's perfect, and you don't necessarily want to have to buy a new head joint 2 years later. Take your time, don't let yourself get overwhelmed, and don't be afraid to rule things out. If you're kind of on the fence about it, don't even consider it anymore. Because if you're wavering on it, you probably don't actually like it. You're just too scared to knock it out. Try them for other people. Don't just play for the person in the room and for you. Like, take it home and play with it, and play it for your teacher, play it for your friends, play it in youth orchestra or whatever you can, or school orchestra, whatever you can, to really try it for real. When I was trying the head joints, I literally played a performance on each of the 2 that fit on my flute and made a decision partially on that. And yes, it was a little stupid of me to play an actual performance on a head joint I had never really tried, but it was a great trial by fire. If you have the chance to play it in performance or play it in a real professional setting and you like it, that's a big thing. If you can trust that it'll work and you've barely even played it, that's a great sign. I think my best advice and my biggest thing is take the time that you need, and don't let society and the flute world tell you what you should get. You see all these professionals playing on these specific makers and you go, that's what I need. I want to sound like this person. But you aren't that person. Physically, you don't play like them. Your face isn't the same as them. And you don't have to replicate anyone. You want to find something that's perfect for you. So yeah, you can go, okay, well, Emmanuel Payud is a Haynes artist, so I want to try Haynes. But if you don't like Haynes, it's not because you can't be Emmanuel Payud. It's because you and Haynes just don't get along. But maybe something like Brannon would be perfect for you, and you sound even more like Emmanuel Payud than you did on the Haynes. You can do the things that you want to do, and you can emulate the people that you want to emulate without playing on the same setup as them. Yeah, it's cool to say, I play the same flute as this person. But do you really? You just play the same maker, but it was built however many years later or earlier by probably a different person, and handmade flutes change based on, well, like the second, basically. So the maker ends up not really being the big deal, it's more how it plays for you. This video was helpful, albeit a little rambly, but that's kind of how I function, so let's be real. As always, the 52 Weeks of Flute Call is linked in the description. That one's open until April 15th. I'm picking 32 pieces. You guys know the drill. I'm also linking the Untwelve Call, which I'm involved in. Untwelve is an organization that supports microtonal music, and so this is a microtonal only call. The musicians involved are myself, Emily Mihai, clarinetist that I live with and you've seen a lot of, and Lyle Mason, who's a bassoonist based in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and Connor Thummel, who's a trombonist who's also based here in Chicago. All the information you need is in that call, so go check that out. As always, if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe if you're new here, and if you guys want to support me more, go check out my Patreon.